And then 3 months after that was when my then husband came to visit me on tour, came to see the show, and then he told me that he was gay.
Wow.
I have been pulling so much of my value from how I look, which is why I feel extra shattered. After we were like, okay, let's try and see if this could be real, Micah was like, okay, I don't want to do anything physical. I just got extremely physically rejected. And now you're telling me that you do like women, but you don't want to be physical with me. It was just another day where I was praying for it. In an instant, I was like, it was gone. And I felt so much lighter.
I have chills.
And I was like, it was all, I couldn't have done that without God.
Welcome back to the Salty Podcast. Today I have a very special guest. This is Sarah.
Hi everybody, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. All the way from New York. So jealous. Like I want to go there so bad.
You guys gotta come visit us.
Exactly. We're already planning a trip. We're going to go stay with them. So Sarah and her husband, we met them through social media. They also do social media. What platform did y'all start with?
Started with TikTok.
Okay.
Like I started on TikTok, just him.
Yeah.
And then eventually I got roped into the whole shebang as well, and then took over to Instagram as well. So TikTok and Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many years have y'all been doing that?
Gosh, well, we had like our first viral video happened in 2021, but we really got serious about it like maybe 6 months after that, where it was like, oh, we could really do something with this. Been like about a little over 2 years that we've been like really doing it consistently and pursuing it aggressively. So yeah, what an adventure.
Yeah.
Who knew?
I know, right? For sure. And that is like the beauty of social media is like meeting people.
It is.
Like it is such a God thing, just the community we've gained from it.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're also with the same management company.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of Christian couples on there too. But I'm like, how funny is that?
I never anticipated that we would like meet the people that we've been able to meet through social media, or that we would have shared values with so many people who are also doing social media. So it's been real cool. It is such a God thing.
Yes, for sure. Well, I am so excited. I've already had a pleasure of talking a little bit and hearing her testimony. Y'all, some of this stuff I just cannot wait to hear more about it, because she just gave me the snippets and I'm like, oh my gosh, the encouragement that I got from her story is just amazing. So let's just talk about, were you raised Christian? Like talk about maybe your childhood and your upbringing.
Yeah. I grew up in Kansas and I grew up Christian, going to church, and it was always just it was like where I hung out with my friends, was at church. Did that all through high school. Then I went to college and just unintentionally kind of fell away from my faith or plugging into any kind of faith-focused community just because I was busy. College was crazy. I studied dance and I was just going from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And so I wasn't building an intentional relationship with God during college. And then it was after college when I moved to New York that I was like, all right, I want to plug back into some kind of community. I found a church that I started going to. It wasn't really until I booked a cruise ship that I started to really dive back into my own personal walk with the Lord, because I had a lot of time to myself on the ship and a lot of free time. And so I spent a lot of time alone and a lot of time with God. And that was kind of where I really for the first time built a true one-on-one like friendship with God, where I felt like we were in relationship. I wasn't just sort of feeling a compulsion to behave a certain way out of obligation or like because it's the right thing to do. I actually got rooted in him and then wanted to align with, how Jesus's example, all the principles that he teaches because of the friendship that I was building with him. Yeah. So that was in I was like 23, 24 when I really like found that relationship and got more rooted and decided that I wanted to make it a priority in my life.
Yes, I love that, because even like me, I grew up in church and I went through a period too. It's almost like I had to unlearn things that I was taught as a kid, the religious side, the rules, like kind of thing. And then almost just kind of did my own thing, still saying I was a Christian and loved Jesus. I was just I didn't have that relationship. And so then building that relationship, it really had to be like my decision.
Yes, exactly.
And not based on what I learned from my parents growing up. So that's awesome. So in college, that's when you kind of fell away. And you told me this is when you met your first husband, correct?
Yes, my ex. Yeah. It was like, we had fun. He was a performer. We had a lot of similar values because he grew up Christian. He grew up in a small town in Missouri. So we related on like that foundation. And also I think even more so the importance of family, because he was close with his family. I was close with my family. And we loved to perform, and we just had fun. We got along. And we were together all through college, and we got engaged. We worked some summer theater gigs together, and he proposed to me at one of those summer theater gigs. Okay. And that was right after I graduated. He was a year younger than me. So he had 1 year of college left, and I had just graduated. So he proposed to me that summer. And then we got married. We were engaged for like 2 years. We got married 2 years later. And actually in those 2 years was when I did that cruise ship contract where I really found my relationship with the Lord.
Wow. Yeah.
So we were at a distance from each other. And that was actually why I spent so much time alone, because I just didn't necessarily want to engage in just some of the stuff that goes when you're in a contained environment. You only have so many people.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So that was kind of what led to me spending a lot of time by myself and finding that relationship with the Lord. And so then I actually got off the ship early, a month earlier than the contract was supposed to end, so that we could get married.
Okay.
And then we got married right after I got off that ship.
Okay.
And we got married in 2014. Okay. So that's been almost 10 years, almost 10 years ago, which is nuts. Yes. I can't believe I'm like old enough to have that kind of gap in my life experience.
Right. Like it's been a decade, basically.
Yeah. At the time, it was a really exciting season of life to be in. I didn't know what was going to come.
Right.
But it was beautiful at the time.
Yes. Do you feel like, you having that one-on-one time, it kind of separated? Because even me, like in my relationship with Hunter, at multiple times I became distracted, and he would like become my God, like who I unintentionally worshiped, Absolutely. I worshiped that relationship and all that. So do you feel like having that time one-on-one kind of helped?
I would say so. Yeah. Because it's so easy to like the person who you're in a relationship with to put them first.
Yeah.
Because they're right here. You can see them, you can feel them, that's something that Micah and I are always praying about, where it's like, how do we actually put God first in our relationship? Totally. How do we prioritize that relationship before ours? And I feel like that's going to be a lifelong journey.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Especially, I think, depending on how we're wired and what fills our love tank or like our love cup. Because if it's more tangible things that fill that, then it's easier to get that from someone that you can reach out and feel.
Yeah.
Whereas with God, we have to experience his love for us in a unique and different way. And sometimes when we like, I like to be affectionate. I'm like a physical touch person. Yeah. And so I can't do that with God. I can't hug God,
I wish.
I know, right? So I think that can also create a more difficult, it's harder to connect depending upon how we're wired and what helps us experience that someone loves us. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. And I think that even plays into, your temporary fixes to fill voids. The world's way of filling those gaps and voids is tangible. It's just a hit of dopamine. Yep. Go buy something. You name it. It's because it's easy to do.
Yep.
But it's harder to get that fulfillment from God. Like it's a process. It can be, and so I love how that all plays a part, and even in relationships. Because sometimes I'm just like, can I just like crawl in Jesus' lap and just let him hold me?
Truly.
Please. Or call him on the phone.
Absolutely. Like, need some help,
like,
please.
Audibly talk to me today.
Truly. Yeah. It's funny.
So your time alone prepared you for what you didn't know you would walk through later. Yeah. You want to talk about that?
I would say that it definitely did. Yes. Gosh, I'm like, what's the timeline? So I got married in 2014, and then we were back in New York, living life. We were both just auditioning, grinding, working a bunch of jobs, trying to make ends meet. And it was about a year of auditioning when then I booked the Beauty and the Beast tour, which is where I met Micah, my now husband. When I booked the tour, I was hesitant to do it because I was like, I'm married, I have a life here. I'm going to leave for 11 months and be away from this person that I've committed my life to for 11 months felt scary. Even though as a performer, you kind of know that that's part of your journey if you're really looking to create success in that career field. So I eventually decided to take the tour. We go on tour. The tour started in August. I think we started rehearsal in August of 2015. And then in September of 2015, unrelated, my brother passed away. So that was a big life change moment that kind of really put my priorities in front of me. And then 3 months after that was when my then husband came to visit me on tour, came to see the show, and then he told me that he was gay.
Wow.
And so it was kind of in September, my brother passed away. In January, that happened with my ex-husband. And so it was just a packed 3 months of difficulty for me.
For sure.
And the tour really provided me with both healthy and unhealthy distraction because it was something I could channel energy into that I really enjoyed. I was so happy that I had a show to do where I could engage in performing, which was something that really filled my soul. I had that, I was really grateful to have that distraction. But then Micah and I got into a relationship that was more of an unhealthy distraction, honestly, at the time.
Yeah. And
it's so funny to think of where we are now and what our relationship was like then. And the fact that I never thought that sort of rebound situation would become what our relationship is now.
Wow.
And that we would get married and how God would work in our relationship. And just, it's so, when you look back on your life, it's so cool to see how God works in situations. And when you're in it, it can feel so painful and hard. But then when you get to the other side, when you have the faith that you're going to get to the other side and you know God's going to help you get to the other side, then when you do, you look back and you see his hand all across the situation. Yeah. Even when it was feeling really painful and lonely, you can look back and see how he was there the whole time.
I know. I love that. And I can't even fathom losing your brother and then your ex coming to you and what was when your brother died, was that unexpected?
It was. He had spina bifida, so he had a disability. He was a wheelchair user, but he was healthy his whole life. And we had a great relationship. He was paralyzed from the waist down, but otherwise could functional upper body, could speak, could, think, uses otherwise lived a life just like mine. And my parents went so above and beyond and out of their way to ensure that anything that he wanted to do, he was able to do it. He was able to try it. So he lived a very full life, was super healthy for his whole life. And then it was the last year of his life that he started having some respiratory issues, and no doctor could tell my parents what was going on. He would have these episodes where he would stop breathing. And it was very scary and stressful. Yeah. And so then eventually he just ended up he wasn't at home, he was out, and he stopped breathing. And by the time someone noticed, he had been without oxygen to his brain for too long. So even though they restarted his heart, it was he wasn't gonna be himself ever again. His brain function wasn't there anymore after the lack of oxygen. So it was when you lose someone you love right before your eyes, when you have to decide that you're gonna unplug the machines and watch them literally go from this side of eternity to the next, that changes you as a person. And you can either choose to lean into the comfort of God or turn away and be angry.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask, is how that affected your relationship with God. It's sometimes easy to not lean in to God and just kind of sit in your own sadness and grief.
Absolutely. I always thank God again, just because I don't know why I'm wired the way that I am, but I wasn't ever angry at God. And I always was this is my source. What else am I going to do? How else am I going to get through this? I don't know. I can't do it on my own. So I need something beyond myself. And so I leaned into him. And it's crazy how when I started the tour, my plan was to journal for the entirety of the tour so that I'm not really a big journaler in my everyday life, but I wanted to remember the tour specifically. And it just so happened that I had 2 very traumatic things happen to me on that tour.
Wow. Yeah.
So when I go back and I read my journal, I'm just so thankful to God that he, for whatever reason, the way that I'm designed, I leaned into him. And when I look back at my journal, it's still very filled with hope and thankfulness. And I look back and I'm like, oh wow, like thank you, because it's not me, you know, it's Jesus. So I've always been a person that has gone towards him in difficult times for whatever reason, but I'm thankful that that's how I'm designed.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that probably people listening to that have struggled, and maybe like it's encouraging to hear that if you do lean into him, like it's almost unexplainable. Like you would have thought you would have felt all these emotions, and you know, so many people do. And like probably went through grief, sad, and all of those things, but you decided to lean into him. And so ultimately that brought you like unexplained sense of hope and joy, like despite the situation, you know?
Yeah.
How do you feel like you were able to lean into him? Like what things did you do? Did you just spend more time in the Word, or was it just this unexplained like presence, you know?
Yeah. I think from the get-go, it was, you know, that like peace that passes understanding. Like I always felt Micah and I were talking about this the other day, where it's almost a sense of, you almost feel guilty. Because after losing my brother, was it hard? Of course. And it's been like almost 8.5 years since he passed away. And I'll still wake up and be like, I feel really sad today. I miss my brother. And I don't think that ever goes away when it's someone who has like that big of a piece of your heart. But I don't know why, I just knew that I was going to be fine, and that God was going to take care of my heart. He was going to take care of my parents' hearts. And I still, like the day after my brother passed away, I still had moments where I felt happy that day.
Yeah.
And I almost felt bad about that, where I was like, oh shoot, I feel like I should just be real sad all the time.
And people probably around you expected you to be kind of like mopey and sad and, you know?
Yes. So it was totally just like the word says, it was just like that peace that passes understanding, because I had just decided that that's what I was going to lean into. And I think the fact that I had built such a relationship with God previously,
right,
like
prior,
you were saying,
on the cruise.
Yep,
okay.
That was really like I had done that work in a time that was good. So then when something bad came, I was already rooted in him.
He was preparing you for those moments. Like you would have had no idea.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. So a few months after that, your husband came to you. You were on tour still? Okay. And you and Micah had already met.
We had met.
But you were just friends.
We were friends.
And I've talked to him, and I know he had a crush on you, but he's like, dang it, she's married. You know, can't mess with that.
Yeah, literally nothing you could do.
Right.
Yeah, it's so funny because we clicked right away. And I remember telling my then husband, like, it's a little weird, but the person that I'm closest to on this tour is like a straight guy. And, you know, it's so funny, always hindsight, because he was like, he didn't have anything negative, questioning, nothing. He was like, no, but I just want you to have, like, I'm just glad you have someone there who you can connect with since we can't be together. And I was like, it's kind of a weird response.
Right. Like you were hoping he'd be like, maybe a little jealous or.
Yes. Because I'm like, if it were me, I'd be like, I don't really like that.
Boundaries.
Like I'm not a fan. But at the time I was like, wow, what a mature response. That is so adult. And then obviously cut to like, no wonder you were starting to feel, you were like, oh, thank God.
Right.
Maybe this will be, you know, I don't know what he was, I don't know exactly what he was thinking, and I'm totally putting words in his mouth, but it's funny to look back on.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so he came, he told me he was gay. It was really, I could tell how how much it was hurting him to tell me that. And I have so much respect for the fact that once he allowed himself to realize that he was straightforward with me.
Yeah. He didn't hide it.
He didn't hide it. And that I was the first person that he told. And I knew that my response and how I reacted to him was really going to dictate, because obviously it's like, we're married. Our whole lives are intertwined. Our families are intertwined. Super close with his family, super close with mine. So I knew that, okay, well, however, people are going to take a lot of their cues off of me and how I react to this. So if I'm bitter and angry, other people are going to feel like they should be too for my sake. But if I have as much grace as I can, then I think other people are going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's just so God. Like, I'm just a person with normal emotions. And the fact that I was able to walk through that situation with, again, when I look back, a lot of grace.
Yeah.
I was kind, I was understanding. Did I have moments where I was angry? Yes, of course. But I always was just like, I want to navigate the situation and not say something I'm going to regret, say something I don't mean out of anger in a moment. And that was truly all him working through me. So yeah, that was very difficult.
Yeah.
Because that changes the whole picture of what you think your life is going to be. Because obviously I had this picture of what our life was going to be like.
Right. Were y'all talking about having kids and all of that?
Not for a while, just because of the career that we were in, and we were in our mid 20s. And so we were just like, that wasn't something that we were going to be doing anytime soon. And honestly, thank goodness.
Right.
That would have been so difficult.
It'd like make it even harder for that situation.
I can't even imagine. And that's why I respect him so much for coming to me and telling me as soon as he really allowed himself to figure it out. Because otherwise, like, if he had tried to stuff it down, we'd continued on. Who knows when he would have been able to keep it inside anymore, and then where our life would have been if we would have had some kids. And that would have just been obviously much, much, much worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was hard, but it was, again, it just gave me more opportunity to lean into God and to really have to get even more deep rooted in him in order to forgive and mostly rebuild my heart and my self-image.
Yeah.
Because that really, really rocked my self-image.
I can imagine. Like, let's go into that a little bit of just how, because yes, like, you had so much grace and whatever, but you were also hurt. And so, like, what did it cause for you that you really had to deal with by yourself?
I think it allowed me to realize where I had been pulling my value and my worth, because I realized how hurt I was, that I felt as though I was being rejected physically, mostly, because he and I are still to this day, we're great friends.
Okay.
Like, how God has worked in our relationship is amazing. And I respect him so much, and we really have a fantastic, like, when I think of who's someone I could call, that would, if I was in a pickle and I needed someone, he's like at the top of the list. And him and his husband are just great people. And again, God has really redeemed that relationship for Micah and I to have a great friendship with the two of them. Number one, why does my mind go to the idea that I'm being rejected physically? Why is that what I'm focusing on? And then why is that so hurtful for me? And so that allowed me to realize how much value and worth I had been attaching to how I look, my body. And I think that comes from, like, in a field that's pretty shallow, and it matters how you look when it comes to performing and just body image and all of that kind of stuff. Once I had the realization that, like, oh shoot, I have been pulling so much of my value from how I look, which is why I feel extra shattered. And I don't know that without that experience, I don't know that I ever would have realized how poor my self-image actually was. I thought that I was a confident person, but where I was taking my confidence was not from anything that actually matters. It wasn't from my character, wasn't from how I live my life, wasn't from my values. It was all from how I looked. So once I realized that, then I was like, okay, well, now I have to work on this. So then that was a whole other journey of navigating, okay, how do I build a self-image that is based upon my character? And if my character isn't at a level at which I'm proud of it, how do I change that? How do I grow my character? How do I become a more complete, more of who God intends me to be? So that whole losing my brother and then my ex, it really set me on a journey of really stepping into who God intended for me to be. And when I look back on it, I'm grateful for it, because I wouldn't be who I am today.
For sure.
And it wouldn't have set me on the journey that it set me on, that has put me now, almost 8 years later or so, I have a life that I never could have imagined. And I think a lot of it has to do with how I chose to build my character and how I chose to just kind of almost change my outlook on life completely. So it was a really transformative journey, what I did. And I couldn't have done that without also going through a journey of forgiveness, which I had to do alongside God, because I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. That's hard. It's hard. It's really hard.
We talked a little bit about that, and just how when you are harping unforgiveness towards somebody, that person might not know it. They aren't feeling what you're feeling.
No.
Bitterness, anger, all those things. And it makes, I remember going through a season of unforgiveness, and I hated myself. I hated the way I felt.
Yeah.
I felt toxic. I felt and I'm like, that person doesn't even realize.
Yep.
It's not doing anybody good. They don't even know but me.
Yeah.
And so how did you go through that season of unforgiveness? It was a process, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was so much prayer, so much Googling scriptures on forgiveness, and then just writing those things down, praying over those things. And after my ex came to me and told me that, I prayed for probably at least a year of just help me forgive, because I didn't want to be angry,
right,
because I knew that I wanted to have a friendship with him on the other side of everything.
Yeah.
And so, I prayed daily for God to please help me, because I didn't know what else to do, honestly. So it's just what you said about feeling toxic within your own heart. It's such a gross feeling.
Yes.
And I was just I'm rotting myself from the inside.
Really?
And it's all my own doing. It's not that it will necessarily go away overnight. And so I prayed every single day. I meditated on scripture every single day. And then after about a year of praying, I really, because when you wish ill upon someone, it's just such a gross feeling where you're like, what is wrong with me? I can't believe I would have these thoughts. I can't believe I would have it in my heart to hope that something goes wrong in someone's life. And so when I was having those thoughts, I was just like, okay, God, I need you to take these thoughts away. I need you to take these feelings away, because I don't know how to get rid of them on my own. After about a year of praying for that, it was just another day where I was praying for it, and it felt like God took a little vacuum hose and sucked it right out of my heart. And in an instant, I was it was gone. And I felt so much lighter.
I have chills.
And I was actually hopeful for Nick and his now husband. I was hopeful for them, and I was wishing that they would be able to build a healthy relationship. And I was wanting good for them, which made me feel more like myself. So, and it was all, I couldn't have done that without God.
100%. Yeah. That gave me chills. It's how you said it was gone in an instant. And I feel like a lot of people will be able to relate in the sense of, you said a year. You were meditating and praying for a year for God to take it, you know? And I think a lot of times is people feel like they know they need to forgive, but honestly, you're like, I can't. It's not happening.
Yes.
And I went through that season of unforgiveness, kind of same thing happened. It went on for so long, and I knew I wanted it to go away. I didn't want to feel unforgiveness. And then finally, one day, God just took it away. And my mindset shifted, the way I viewed that situation shifted, and it felt so good and freeing, you know? But it is so hard. Like, and I'm even imagining if somebody's watching this, like in that stage of going through unforgiveness, like, and they're like, how, you know? Because it is, you're like, okay, I wish we could just meditate and pray for one day and it's gone. But like, it took you a year, you know? And so it is like, and this is, I mean, we might not know the answer to this because I don't, but like, why does it take so long sometimes, you know?
Totally.
Like,
I wish it could be like, this is how long it's going to take, you know? Because maybe for me, it took a year, but for someone else, it's going to take 3.
Yeah.
You know? And it's so hard when if you're 2 years in to praying for forgiveness and you're not experiencing any breakthrough where you're like, is it ever going to come? But I really believe that, and this is just from having conversations with people who have gone through journeys of of forgiving, and then people who haven't, who are still like holding on to certain things. And I think that when we truly desire to forgive, and we're asking for God to help us, we're partnering with him in that effort, and we have no desire to hold on to it, because I think some people, they say they want to let it go, but there's a little bit of like victim mentality that they actually want to hold on to it slightly, because it allows them to behave a certain way or feel that they are like, well, this happened to me, so this. It's like almost an excuse for things. So I think when people have a little bit of that in them, it's much harder for them to actually forgive.
Yeah. And I think that, like, because the season I walked through, I don't think I could have ever fully forgiven. It's almost like I was having to go through the process of different things, like self-pity. I self-pitied myself so much.
Yes.
So, of course, the unforgiveness wasn't just going to go away, because I had things that God was like, we've got to deal with this, because you have to go deal with those things before you can feel that freedom, you know? And so in the year of praying and all that, were there things that God like revealed to you that you were having to, that you worked on? Looking back, can you see the process and being like, okay, I feel like that's why it took a year, because there were certain things that had to happen within that year before we got to that point of unforgiveness.
I think, yes. And I think a lot of it had to do with the journey of me like unattaching my value from my appearance.
Yeah.
And that sounds so superficial, but when you spent years getting rooted in a wrong mindset surrounding your value, that also takes a long time to break, and to uproot all of that and then plant different seeds. And so I think the journey, the paired journey of repairing my self-image along with wanting to forgive, I think it was the combination of those two things, and how God worked on me during that season where I had that sort of little bit of shame in me that I hadn't been able to forgive. I also was making a lot of progress in regards to my self-image. It was an interesting juxtaposition of feeling like there's this one thing, but I'm also becoming, I'm stepping more into my true value over here. And so I think those paired journeys is what created my specific timing.
Yeah. What a journey, you know? And that is why I think being a Christian and having a relationship with God, it is a sanctification process. It is a continual growth. You know, there's things that God is constantly revealing to me, things that I thought I worked on, or I have worked on it. But I mean, we live in a broken world, fallen world. We're going to be tempted. The enemy is going to be continuing throwing darts. And almost like I can recognize, because of the growth, like say unforgiveness, if something happens, if I can recognize like traits, I'm like, I'm not going back down that road. Lord, come take it.
Absolutely. Block me from that path. Yeah.
And so I feel like all of the things we go through, it helps us just continue to navigate through this life, you know, until Jesus comes back or it's our time to go. So you went through that period, unforgiveness, all of that, you and Micah. Like, when did that happen?
Like, once the tour ended, we were kind of like, all right, let's see if this can this relationship can happen in real life. Like I liken her to like The Bachelorette because it's like not real life.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a paid vacation. And you're just like, you're not having to worry about paying your rent. You're not paying your bills. You just don't have the same everyday worries in that environment that you do in life. So it creates like a romantic bubble almost.
Okay.
Where then it's like, okay, but what about when we have to we have the stress of life happening to us every day. We're both working 3 jobs. We're auditioning. We're not booking the things we want. Like, then what does our relationship look like? So we got back to New York and we're like, all right, let's just see what happens. And because our relationship had started so physically, once we got into a relationship, it was basically just like, that was a big unhealthy distraction for me. After we were like, okay, let's try and see if this could be real, Micah was like, okay, I don't want to do anything physical then. So nothing at all. And that was the next step of me working through my self-image stuff. Because I was like, you serious? Like, I just got extremely physically rejected. And now you're telling me that you do like women, but you don't want to be physical with me. And so it was just another, again, God used that to take another layer off of like my wrong thinking. And what that did for Micah's and my relationship, I'm such a big, obviously we didn't wait until marriage, but then we chose from that point on to wait. And I'm such a big proponent for that because of what it did for our emotional intimacy and for my self-image just as a woman. And obviously my situation was specific with what I was already working through. It was like the perfect storm of stuff that allowed me to realize those things. So then that was the journey that we went on as we continued to build our relationship and see if it could become something that was right, that was centered on the right things versus not the right things.
Right. So Micah was Christian.
Yes.
Too. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. And he had a lot of guilt surrounding like sex before marriage.
Right.
And so he was always kind of struggling with that, but then, he's a human, so just fall again and again and again. And so then once he said like, I want to commit to this because I really want to see if this can be something real. And I think in order for us to figure that out, we have to eliminate that part of our relationship. And I was just not happy. I was not happy at all. It's just so amazing how God works, because what that did for me and for our relationship is it's a big reason why we have the relationship that we have today and why we've been able to build such a healthy foundation of marriage and why we were able to build such a great foundation through our engagement before we got married. It was very difficult at first, but wow, it was so rewarding. How God used it and how we learned how to create intimacy without that was so necessary.
Right.
And when you're young, it's kind of, you can't even imagine the time in your life where you're like, someday I'm going to be like old and crusty, and you might not want to do that.
Yeah. Cause I feel like it does be like go out of relationships eventually, so then you don't have the physicalness to rely on anymore. Yeah. So it's like, y'all have done that.
Yes. Yeah. Gotta have like be equipped to feel, cause I was like, well, so how are we more than friends then without that?
Right.
So then it had to be like, okay, well, how do we create a bond of romantic relationship without that? And that was an amazing journey to go on that God also really, really worked in and helped us navigate through.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, like going in so detail about it. And, I feel like a lot of people will be able to relate to that, And so y'all have been married for
3 years, a little over 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. And have y'all walked through, have there been seasons? Do you feel like that time prepared y'all for like things you're walking through now and stuff like that?
Yes, I do think so, because it has, well, first of all, I think that a lot of the stuff we go through is if we're willing to work through it, and like, I'm a huge proponent for counseling. Like we had counselors as we were walking through all of these things.
Amazing. Yeah.
We see Christian counselors, which is just what we like to do, because we want them to have the lens of that they're coming through, the word.
Yeah.
Through that season of navigating difficulty, and just everything was not picture perfect. Like things were hard. When you have uncomfortable conversation, like having uncomfortable conversations is never fun. And I'm like such a conflict avoider. And so being able to navigate those seasons, be forced to have uncomfortable conversations, which I think is why counselors are so helpful, because they allow for a space to do that where you feel even extra safe. I always felt safe with Micah, coming to him about anything, but it's more about letting go of what he's thinking of me and being able to like drop the mask completely in front of him. And I think a third party helps with that.
For sure.
But yes, navigating that season has allowed us to, number one, be really equipped to share with other people. And I really feel an immense responsibility to be open about the things that I've been through, because if someone else is going through something similar, maybe it's not the exact same, but if it's, they're struggling with something, I want them to know that it's not just them.
Yeah.
They're not alone. The enemy always makes us want to feel like we're isolated and alone in what we're going through. And it's just not true. There's always someone else who's experienced it or who's maybe experiencing it at the exact same time. So I think number one, being able to help other people navigate through difficult things is a big, like I look at what I've been through as tools that have equipped me to help other people.
Yeah.
But then also, navigating like in this past year, we went through a miscarriage. And I think without our foundation of relationship and our foundation of emotional intimacy that we had built and the safe space that we had created in our marriage, that process would have been much more difficult.
For sure.
Without that.
And that was at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, it was in May.
Okay.
No one ever thinks that that's going to be part of their story.
Of course, yeah.
Especially the first time you get pregnant, when you're like so excited about this new thing that's happening in your life. So that I could have never anticipated that would be. I also, this is something I think about frequently, where depending upon, like I'm a person of very high expectation of what's going to happen in my life. Like I am always expecting the best in my life. I'm always expecting that I'm going to have great things happen in my life, that God is going to do amazing things through me. And so I think sometimes, I think that's good. And I love that about myself. And I'm happy that God wired me that way. And that I've also put in work to continue to develop that way of thinking. But sometimes that leads to such low disappointments low valleys, because it's like, never would I have even had a thought that this would be the what the circumstance would be, because of just my outlook to be like, this is going to be amazing and great. You know? So I think that can make the valleys a little bit more difficult, but I wouldn't change it, because I think there's so much power in having positive expectation over what we're going to experience in our lives. Yeah. So, but it did make navigating the miscarriage was really hard. There have been very few times in my life where I have felt like debilitated by emotion. And that was definitely a time, like after that happened, where it was just like, Micah was, wanting to film content or whatever it may be. And I was just like, I literally can't, I just have to, all that I can do is like sit in this chair and cry. Yeah. And I can't, I don't know how to turn it off. Yeah. And he, he would just be, of course he was the most understanding. I was just like, I'm just going to sit here with you. And if you need something, you just tell me what it is,
Yeah. I'm so sorry. Like you had to walk through that. And that's what so many people walk through miscarriage. And that is so like unexplainable unless you've gone through it. Yeah. And so you sitting here today and like looking back, I'm proud of you for like the growth you've had and like seeing how much God has moved in your life, honestly, over all those seasons. And I think that's just a representation. Like people think Christianity, like that means your life's gonna be rainbows and butterflies. Yes. Nothing goes wrong. God has favor on your life. And although he does, we live in a fallen world. So we're gonna experience heartache, heartbreak, all those things. But thank God that we have him to turn to in those, as hard as it was. Like, did you have moments of kind of just like ignoring maybe your walk with God at that point? Almost just like you needed a breather just to sit in the hurt you were in pain from the miscarriage? I think anytime I would feel that, like experience that kind of pain where it was just like, I can't do anything, I would need a moment to just kind of like let it out. And then I would be like, okay, I know God's going to bring
going to bring me through this, and he's going to redeem my heart. He's going to redeem the whole situation. He has a plan in place. But that, even getting to the point where I actually believed that, it takes some time to navigate through all of that, because then it's like, depending upon, everyone's situation or experience with miscarriage, if someone has been through that, is very different. Yeah. For me, I had a lot of guilt that I had to work through. And for that I needed God, because anytime we have guilt surrounding something like that, it's coming from the enemy. When I was pregnant, I did not feel well at all. I was just very annoyed by that. Being like physically held back is something that I just hadn't experienced in my life. So going through that, I was like, this is annoying to me. And then I felt, obviously after I had the miscarriage, I was like, well, maybe if I hadn't have had those thoughts, maybe if I would have been more grateful, this wouldn't be my situation. Maybe if I hadn't been so complainy about feeling nauseous all the time, maybe it wouldn't have happened, So then
totally the enemy, but I get that. Yeah.
And navigating through all of that, and really getting to the point where it's like, that's not coming from God. That's coming from the enemy. And I have to find truth in that, in the dark, in the pain. I have to find like, what's actually true.
Yeah.
Which again goes back to the work that I put in years before, learning how to take my thoughts captive and really understand what are lies, when I'm telling myself lies, or when I'm being told lies in my head, and grabbing hold of those things and figuring out what's the truth.
Yeah.
Because that can be so hard.
Oh my gosh.
And if we don't do it consistently, when tough times come, it's very difficult to take hold of what is true and what is self-pity, what is the enemy, what, just all the things that swirl around in our human heads.
Yeah. It's like mashes up, and then you're just like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Where am I? Yes. What's real? How am I supposed to be feeling?
Right. And I think it's such a beautiful thing how God allows for the verse about there's a time for everything. And I think even sometimes, I almost expect myself to not be able, I shouldn't feel that way, because joy comes from him and stuff. But he's very clear, there is a time for everything. There's a time for pain, time for grief, all those things, time for sadness, time for laughing. And so going through, just hearing you talk about it, God was with you, but I don't think God is just like, all right, suck it up. It's good. You're good. You're in my will. This is, it's like he knows your pain. He sees it. And I just see a picture of him just almost hugging you, you know, and just not even speaking. Cause sometimes, you don't want anybody to speak. You just want somebody to know they're there.
Yep.
And I think he's the perfect representation of that. He's always there. I just love that imagery of him, because he knows you're going to get through it with him. Yeah. But he's there and allows you to feel all those things.
Yes. I think that's so powerful, because it, like you were saying, how oftentimes it's like, oh, you're a Christian. You're sunshine and rainbows all the time. Or where it's I think almost like a toxic kind of positivity. And God never gives us that.
Yeah.
He can handle our emotions, even if we're angry at him. That's what I always have gone back to, where it's if you're angry at God, take it to him, because he can handle it.
Yeah.
Don't think that he knows, even if you're not talking to him about it, he knows you're not hiding anything from him. So just take it to him, because he can handle it. And when we're in any kind of pain, I love that imagery as well. And so many times when I've been going through hard times, if I'm meditating or visualizing, it's literally me with my head in Jesus's lap. It's okay.
Just
you're gonna be
you're
gonna be good. But it's not. Yeah. But it's not that. It doesn't mean you can't feel the pain, because you have to. You have to navigate that first before you get to the peace.
Yeah, and we were all talking last night, and I think Micah was saying, we have to go through suffering, pain, all those situations is how we grow and how we become who we are and step more into the calling of God on our life. Because just like Jesus, he is a testament to, he's been through everything we've been through. He's not going to tell us you're going to get, you can get through this, because without him going through it first, he has gone before us, so he has already been through all that. And that's why comforting too. It's not that just some beautiful, perfect, I mean, he's beautiful and perfect, not what I'm saying, but that never has experienced the human suffering and all that. Like, that is why Jesus came to this earth, to feel what we feel. And so he can be like, I relate. Like, I've gone before you, you're going to be okay, you know?
Yeah. And that's what's so unique and special about being a Christian is that you have that to lean on, where it's like, I have this almighty creator who I can go to, but who also has felt the pain that I'm going through, and even more so.
Yeah, so good. This has just been a great talk. If you could say, like, if there's listeners out there who have maybe, is there anything you feel like you need to say to somebody, whether it's about forgiveness, miscarriage, you know, rejection, just like that's on your heart right now? If not, it's fine.
I think mostly kind of what I said before, like, you're not alone in what you're going through. There's other people who have gone through it, who are going through it. If you don't have community in your life that is lifting you up, do everything that you can to find it. It's so important, whether it's through church, whether it's through some kind of mentor, whatever, whether it's through family, whatever it is, like, get people in your corner who are going to lift you up and point you towards the things that are actually going to help you heal. They're not going to sit in your self-pity with you.
Right.
They're going to treat you with kindness and grace, obviously, but they're going to point you towards the things that can really help you. And so I'd say, number one, you're not alone. Number two, find, if you don't have people in like a good community, truly do everything you can to find one.
No, I think that is so good. And like, people who have the same values as you.
Yes.
You know, because even there's people that I've had in my life that they give sound advice, you know, but I'm just like, it wasn't, you know.
Yes.
But then people who are spirit-filled and that know God and the way that they have led me to getting through things and whatever, just by people praying and all that. And I know, because that's hard. I feel like a lot of people struggle with finding community.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know? And that's something you need to pray for it.
Yes,
too, you know?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because the voices that we let speak into our life are everything. Because like what we were talking about before, we have the ultimate relationship with God, but on a daily basis, what are the voices that are speaking into our life and speaking into our hearts? And that's all like I could really go off on that for,
I know.
for a while.
No, I know. And that's why, you know, that I keep that verse about just setting your mind on things above.
Yes.
And then even things you watch and stuff like that, like without realizing it really does affect you.
Yeah.
And the voices. And so I'm so thankful to have known y'all and like met y'all.
Same.
And you know, it's such a God thing.
Yeah.
And like the community that social media has brought for me.
Yeah.
This conversation was such a blessing. I've learned so much from you, like the wisdom that I can see just growing in you constantly. Like, girl,
Thank you.
It's so amazing.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. You guys are such special people. And like, we had so much fun last night. Just talking. We could talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, how much can we just keep going? Part 2. But thank you so much for being here. And they actually have a podcast coming out. And it is the Fortitude.
Yep, the
Podcast.
Fortitude Podcast.
We're actually about to film with them. Yeah. So we'll be on theirs, and they're amazing. If y'all want to follow them, they're on all the socials, and it's Micah and Sarah.
Micah and Sarah.
Okay. Yes, they're hilarious. They're amazing people, great content. But yeah, thank y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.